Circus shows today are fun, but in the 20th century, one thing made them special. That is the sideshow, popularly known as a freak show, a platform for humans with unique abilities and those very different from the bulk of us. Their photos may look very unreal, but they are real humans who once ruled the entertainment industry. These are circus freaks that actually existed with their historical and rare photos. The human caterpillar. This man looks like one of those movie tricks, but no, he's actually a real man named Prince Randian, also known as the human caterpillar. He was a sideshow performer in the early 1900s who was born with a congenital syndrome that left him without limbs. But he didn't allow that to take him down. He lived his life to prove that he was capable of self-care, mental agility, and the completion of everyday tasks. Usually people like him develop severe medical abnormalities involving the skull and lungs that can cause stillbirth and death immediately after birth. But in Prince Randian's case, he lived through it all, becoming a star in the United States as crowds flocked to see him perform tasks such as rolling and lighting a cigarette, shaving, painting, and writing with the use of his mouth. Truly, you should never judge a book by its cover. Martin Lorello. Again, judging a book by its cover may just be a bad idea because Martin didn't even look like other sideshow freaks. On the contrary, he appeared like any other citizen until he revealed his shocking trick. Martin could turn his head around at more than 120 degrees. No, he wasn't born with this ability, nor was his head ever facing backward against his will. He had to train to master it and spent years doing so. He had dedicated 3 years of his life to successfully turning his head around and was satisfied with every additional inch he could muster, finding his skill in high demand. Remarkably, Martin could drink beer with his head fully turned around. However, he could not smoke or take a breath, which means he could not hold that position for long. The man with no lower body. In Johnny's case, he was born with sacral agenesis, a congenital disorder in which there is abnormal fetal development of the lower spine, which results in a truncated torso. Named Johnny Eck, he described himself as someone who was snapped off the waist, but he actually had underdeveloped, unusable legs and feet, which he would hide under custom-made clothing. Even when Johnny Eck was an adult, he measured just 18 inches at his tallest, but there was something really amazing about him. When he was a kid, he was able to walk on his hands at the age of 1, long before his full-bodied brother was even standing. And as he grew older, he had the intellectual capacity to acquire and hone exceptional skills, becoming an artist, photographer, illusionist, Punch and Judy operator, and his particular forte, model making. He also lived longer than most people expected, with his life tragically coming to an end at age 79 after he suffered a fatal heart attack. The Mule-Faced Woman. If you ever came across this picture, you'd definitely think it isn't real, but this is a real person named Grace McDaniels. She was born in Numa, Iowa, USA in 1888 and was part of a traveling circus that labeled her the ugliest woman in the world. Her facial deformity was the result of her suffering from a rare condition known as Sturge-Weber syndrome, which got her stigmatized in society. She then took part in sideshows to boost her wages, and boom, she became famous and loved by a lot of people. Even though many in the audience would faint at the sight of her, she received several marriage proposals before accepting one and giving birth to a perfectly healthy boy. Mary Ann Beavon. While Grace was born with her deformity, Mary Ann wasn't. She was born in the then outskirts of London in the late 19th century and was healthy throughout her childhood. In fact, she looked much the same as any other young woman of the time, and as you can see, she was considered attractive. But all of that changed when she became an adult. A rare disfiguring disease began to manifest in her. She suffered from acromegaly, which could not be treated with 20th century medicine. After a few years, her features, hands and feet were distorted beyond recognition. According to history, a farmer had mocked her, saying she would qualify as the ugliest woman in the world. Taking the farmer's words to heart, she entered the Ugliest Woman contest and handily beat 250 competitors to earn the dubious title. Her victory brought her to the attention of sideshow owners, and there she made use of her looks to earn a living. The Werewolf Girl. Alice Elizabeth Doherty, also known as the Minnesota Woolly Girl, or the Werewolf Girl, holds the unique distinction of being the only recorded American to be born with hypertrichosis lanuginosa, a condition exceedingly rare and unusual. She was born with a mane of fine and silky blonde hair, which made some call her the American werewolf. Her parents could not comprehend her condition, but soon found out that she was a natural wonder, one that could bring in a lot of money. Soon, Alice was made to join circus performers for sideshows, and of course, she got paid. But fame and money didn't really matter to Alice. She was content with little and soon retired in 1915 in Dallas, where she passed peacefully 18 years later at the age of 46. Edward Mordrake. Whether you know him as Mordrake or Mordrake, Edward was a 19th century Englishman born with an extra face on the back of his head, or maybe not. He is said to be a handsome and normal-faced man, but with an extra at the back of his head which is described as lovely as a dream, hideous as a devil. According to legend, whenever Mordrake cried, the second face would smile and sneer. Mordrake was constantly plagued by his evil twin, which kept him up all night, whispering very bad things to him. Eventually, he was driven mad and took his life at age 23, leaving behind a note ordering that the evil face should be destroyed after his death, to prevent it from whispering in his grave. Whether this story is true or not, no one knows, but it is said that the story was published by a person known to spread fake news. Maximo and Bartola. Both were twins born with microcephaly. Originally, they were from the village of Decora in St. Salvador. The pair, who were intellectually slow and required special care, first appeared in 1848 and began to garner attention. They eventually returned to the United States for exhibition at Barnum's American Museum, where Barnum renamed them as the Aztec Wonders. This name was a result of the speculation that they originated from the Aztecs, as many don't believe that a normal human from this era should have this shape of head. Many of the photos of the duo that exist today are from this era of their career, where people with cameras photographed them. However, the interest of the public in Maximo and Bartola soon died down as reporters and the scientific community moved on to other discoveries. Schlitzie. Another person like Maximo and Bartola is Schlitzie, who was called the last of the Aztecs, Pinhead, or the Monkey Girl. Not to be confused with a female, Schlitzie was a male and his name and origin were unknown. The world only remembers Schlitzie for his deformities that left him with a small, misshapen head. Even as an adult, Schlitzie had the mental aptitude of a 3- or 4-year-old and could only speak in short sentences and phrases. His deformities led to fame when he was used as a freak in sideshows. Schlitzie earned a living with virtually every major circus of the early 20th century, including the Dobrich International Circus, Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Tom Mix Circus, and the Clyde Beatty Circus. Throughout his career, he performed as a female on stage, even though he was male, but throughout his life, he was only known to enjoy feeding pigeons and ducks at MacArthur Park before ultimately dying in 1971. Living skeleton. Born in 1841, Isaac W. Sprague was an entertainer and sideshow performer, known as the living human skeleton. Surprisingly, Isaac was normal for most of his childhood, until the age of 12, when he began losing weight irreversibly after feeling ill after swimming. Although he had a healthy appetite, his weight continued to reduce throughout his life. His condition has been described by historians as extreme progressive muscular atrophy. At the age of 44, Isaac was 5 feet tall and 6 inches, with a weight of only 19.5 kilograms. Ultimately, this condition led to his death in 1887. Lobster Boy. This is not about a boy who owned a lobster, but about hands that looked like they belonged to a lobster. Born Grady Franklin Stiles Jr., his deformity was the genetic condition ectrodactyly, in which the fingers and toes are fused to form claw-like extremities. Because of this, Stiles performed under the stage name Lobster Boy. Using his deformity, Stiles gained fame in a circus which he had been a part of since he was 7. Stiles gained fame and wealth and was also able to marry and have 4 children. Sadly, 2 of his children had the same condition and they traveled together as the Lobster family. But Stiles had an alcohol problem and he was also aggressive. He went too far one day when he shot and killed his oldest daughter's fiancé on the eve of their wedding because he did not approve of him. Luckily, Styles was not sent to prison, as no state institution was equipped to care for an inmate with ectrodactyly. Instead, he was sentenced to house arrest and 15 years probation. During that time, he continued being abusive towards his family, so much so that they paid one of the sideshow freaks to murder Styles. And just like that, Styles lost his life while sitting in his house. The Elephant Man. Back in 1862, when Joseph Merrick was born, his parents never knew that their son would be categorized as a freak. This is because Joseph was a healthy boy who showed no sign of deformity until the age of 5. His parents noticed that his lips had started to swell, a lump was growing on his head, and his skin was becoming loose. As time went on, his family thought that it was possibly caused by his mother's emotions when she was pregnant. For this, they determined that Joseph's condition was caused by Joseph's mother's visit to a fair where she was knocked over by an elephant. Because of his appearance, the showmen named him Elephant Man and advertised him as half a man and half an elephant. Annie Jones Elliott. Called the Esau Lady, Annie was born in 1865 in Marion, Smith County, Virginia. No one in Annie's family had more than the normal hair size. However, Annie had a good-sized mustache at birth, and when she was 2, her beard was fully developed, and she was exhibited in public with great success. Some say the cause of her condition is due to hirsutism, while others think it's just an unrelated genetic condition that affects children and continues well into adulthood. Four-Legged Woman. Yeah, you heard that right. Josephine Myrtle Corbin was born with 4 legs, but it was caused by a rare birth defect called polymelia. Josephine had 4 legs, 2 of which were normal, while the other 2 grew from her hips. But that's not all. She also had 2 sets of reproductive organs and 2 pelvises. As early as 5 weeks after her birth, people visited her home to marvel at the 4-legged woman. But it wasn't free. People were charged a small fee to look at Josephine, and as she grew up, she became accustomed to people staring at her. The inner legs never fully developed, the right foot was clubbed, and both smaller legs had 3 toes on each foot. Over the following decade, Josephine's father took her on a journey across the country where she took part in fairs, sideshows, and dime museums. At the age of 14, she had achieved success, being paid an unusually high salary of $250 per week. Rasmus Nelson. Many have seen this man's picture, but his record isn't out there, so people believed that he didn't exist. Some even called him Stanley Kubrick, but no, he was only photographed by Stanley Kubrick. His real name is Rasmus Nelson, a freak who toured for years with Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers circuses. He was known as the Strongman for his unusual abilities, which included stringing a chain or heavy metals through his nipple rings and attaching it to an anvil, which he would then lift. His ears were also pierced, and he would hang 10-pound weights from the hoops in the lobes. According to sources, he never had kids but loved kids so much that he visited kids at a hospital regularly, and after his death, he left all he had to the hospital. Pasqual P. Looks like Pignon had 2 heads as well. No, that's not true. He was born in 1888 with a large benign cyst or tumor at the top of his head, and he was just a man who worked as a railroad worker. One day, while traveling, a sideshow promoter saw him and was attracted by the large cyst on his head. He took Pignon in and had a fake face made of wax placed on the growth, allowing the claim that he had 2 heads. Pignon toured for several years as a freak until the circus manager paid to have the tumor removed, and Pignon returned to Texas. Eventually, Pignon died in 1929. Ella Harper. Known as the Carmel Girl, Ella was born with a deformity in her legs that made her different from other humans. Every time she attempted to use her misshapen legs to walk, people wondered and cruelly called her names. Eventually, the cause of Ella's condition became known. It was a condition known as congenital genu recurvatum, or simply put back knee deformity. The rare condition made her knees bent the opposite way, which made Ella learn to walk on 4s. The disability helped Ella generate a steady income when she ended up in the circus. She made her first appearance in October 1882 in New Orleans and St. Louis, and before anyone realized it, word spread around and people became desperate to see the girl with extraordinary knees. Maurice Tillay. If you have watched Shrek, you probably think that he was just a fictional character who doesn't exist. Well, Shrek was actually inspired by a real-life person known as the French Angel. But that was not his real name. Born Maurice Tillay, the French Angel was a prominent wrestling star during the 1930s and 1940s. He was known as the French Angel by his childhood friends because he had blonde hair and, according to them, an angelic face. Tillett was diagnosed with acromegaly at the age of 17, and this hormonal disorder caused excessive bone growth in him, particularly his hands, face, and feet. After his acromegaly-induced growth spurt, photos of him show a striking resemblance to Shrek, the ogre from the 2001 movie that we all love. Tillett had dreams of becoming a lawyer, but he joined the French Navy and later pursued a career in professional wrestling in 1937. Despite his condition, Tillett lived a remarkable life and adapted to the challenges caused by his condition. Unfortunately, during his lifetime, treatment for acromegaly was limited, and as years passed, his condition progressed and his cardiovascular system struggled to keep up with his body's growth. As a result, Tillett grew weak and the strength of his character gradually declined. At age 50, Tillett passed away due to a heart attack resulting from his condition. CUO The Bird Girl. Her real name is Minnie Woosley, and she was born in Georgia in 1880. There's a wide variety of stories about her physical condition, but generally it is believed that she was born with Virchow-Seckel syndrome, a condition also known as bird-headed dwarfism. The syndrome is rare and is characterized by a small head, stunted growth, beak-like nose, receding jaw, and some mental limitations. As if that was not enough, the syndrome left Minnie almost completely bald-blind and toothless. Minnie spent the majority of her years in Georgia Asylum until she was rescued by a showman who thought she looked just odd enough to cash in on. Mirin Dejo. What does a pincushion do? It is used to hold pins, which means pins literally pass through the pad and stay in it for as long as possible. That was exactly Mirin Dejo's ability. He was known as the human pincushion because at each performance, someone shoved a real sword straight through Dejo's abdomen and he would hold it in and walk around with it without shedding a single drop of blood. Initially, people thought that the blade didn't pierce through him, but after close examination, it was revealed that the blade stuck through him and left him completely unaffected. The same can't be said of Dejo's audience. Men and women passed out during his performance, and some even had a heart attack. After these problems occurred repeatedly, the Swiss officials intervened and revoked Dejo and his group's performance license, effectively shutting down the show. But did he stop? Not really. He continued performing, and one day he went too far. He swallowed a 35-centimeter metal splinter in 1948, and that marked his final act. Frances O'Connor. The beautiful Frances O'Connor was born on September 8, 1914 in Renville County, Minnesota. She was born without arms, so she learned how to use her feet in incredibly dexterous ways. Despite her condition, she possessed a very outgoing personality, which combined with her natural beauty. On top of that, the sheer spectacle her legs created as they completed daily chores made her a natural for the sideshow. Not only was she beautiful, but her sweet disposition made many men swoon, and according to the story, she turned down hundreds of marriage proposals during her career. Frances was a beauty to behold, and when you watched her use her legs to do things like smoke a cigarette, drink from a cup, cut her food with a fork and knife, and use a napkin to dab the corners of her mouth in a ballerina-like grace, you just can't get enough. Frances could do almost anything with her legs, so much so that she knitted and sewed clothes as a hobby. Monkey Woman. When Priscilla was born to her parents, they were confused as to why she was covered with so much hair. Not only that, she had 2 entire rows of teeth on each jaw, which drew attention to her everywhere she went. Her father, who didn't regard her as human, placed her on exhibit, and she was called the hairy little girl, or the monkey girl. Her condition was a result of hypertrichosis, which means she had a full head of dark hair and a layer of coarse dark hair covering her entire face and body. Priscilla was later adopted, and she became a great success as many people came from far and near to see the hairy little wonder. She later got married and lived happily ever after with her husband, Emmett, the alligator-skinned man, Pauline Myers. The shortest woman you know today isn't the shortest woman that has ever lived. Meet Pauline Myers, recognized by the Guinness World Records as the shortest woman ever recorded, standing at only 24 inches tall. She was born in 1878 in Ossendrecht in North Brabant province, the Netherlands. When she was 2, her father began showing her at fun fairs, and she toured since childhood. Unexpectedly, the family amassed wealth through Pauline's fame. At first, she was only put out on display. Later, she performed in theaters in the circus or freak shows as a living doll, thereby dancing and performing acrobatic acts, singing and interacting with the audience. She would wear elegant, fancy dresses that were tailored to measure and performed under the stage name Princess Pauline. She drew up to 800 spectators because of her amazing abilities, appearance, and skills. Pauline was able to speak Flemish Dutch, French, German, and a little English. All of these made fans love her exceptionally and paid money to watch her performance. Subscribers pick. While it is not clear whether this image really describes a banned circus freak that existed, we do know that anyone who created this image must have had the general image everyone had of these humans in mind. Even though they are humans, most people perceive them as monsters or less humans, which explains why some pretended to help them, but instead exploited them for money in the past. Today, people with disabilities are treated better than in the past, and so we no longer have these shows that people watched for fun. What do you think about sideshows? A way of helping the disabled or a way of setting them up for mockery? Let us know in the comment section. Will Dirks. Dirks was born in 1913, but not with an appearance like every regular child. He was born with 2 noses, 3 eyes, and a hair lip. Adding to his misfortune, he suffered from frontonasal dysplasia, which worsened his cleft palate by creating a cleft through his entire face. This gave the impression of 2 noses. He was described as being hit in the face with an axe. Dirks began exhibiting his most unusual face in sideshows and later at Hubert's Museum in New York City. To add to his bizarre look, he painted a 3rd eye in the gap between his real ones. Aside from finding a livelihood on stage, Dirks also found love and married Mildred, the alligator-skinned woman. JoJo, the dog-faced boy. Fedor Adrianovich Jevtichko was born in 1868 and was known as JoJo, the dog-faced boy, later changed to JoJo, the dog-faced man. He was a famous Russian sideshow performer who toured Europe with his father, the wild man from the Kostroma forest, from 1873 until 1884, when Barnum took him to the United States. Barnum then created a story that involved a hunter in Kostroma who tracked Fedor and his father to their cave and captured them. He described Adrian as a savage who could not be civilized. He stressed Adrian's resemblance to a dog and explained that when he was upset, he would bark and growl, which he did. Sadly, Adrian suffered from pneumonia and died in January 1904. Eli Bowen. You have seen people with no legs or limbs and some with extra, but in Eli's case, he was born with feet attached directly to his pelvis. Born on October 14, 1844, and one of 10 children, he was the only one with a deformity in his family. He was born with feet, but no legs. Despite his physical appearance, he strived to live an extraordinary life. He wanted to be an acrobat and learned to use his arms and hands to compensate for his lack of legs. He would hold thick wooden blocks in his palms and use them as shoes, elevating his torso to walk on his hands. Fanny Mills. During her lifetime, Fanny caused a stir everywhere she went because of her difference from everyone else. She was greatly similar, though not as famous as the Elephant Man. Born in 1860, Fanny was the youngest of her family, and she was normal at birth until everything changed suddenly when she started showing symptoms of swelling and abnormal growth in her lower body from a young age. While people blamed the deformity of the Elephant Man on the elephant that knocked his mother over, Fanny's parents believed her deformities were caused by her pregnant mother having contact with a sick horse. No diagnosis of her condition was made when she was alive, but now we do know that she suffered from Milroy's disease. During her act, Fanny would sit on a chair and raise her legs to expose her gigantic legs and feet, fascinating her audience all the time. Pablo Noel. While there are so many animal trainers, especially cat trainers in the world, Pablo Noel was unique. He had a humoristic style amid a group of roaring lionesses, which has never been duplicated except for one of his contemporaries, Gerd Simonet, who worked similarly to him. Pablo Noel found his unique style, as well as the humorous signature of his act, dictated by his cheerful personality and intimacy, which he easily created. He was a natural, and nothing in his act appeared to be forced or artificial. He soon became a circus star and an audience favorite in Spain and subsequently in Europe. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.